Well, welcome to another episode of the Hector Mike Experience. We've got a lot of interesting stuff going on this past week. Mike, we just heard President Joe Biden talk about the catastrophe, the horrific situation that has happened now in Afghanistan, where in a matter of days, it looks like the Taliban just took over Kabul and has taken over Afghanistan after 2 decades of where the United States military had gone in, kind of try to reestablish some sort of democracy there, tried to train some of their troops, and now we've got Joe Biden, just like I said, just address the nation and I guess just try to salvage some sort of his reputation or his comments that he'd made earlier.
Well, the quote that comes out of it all is Joe Biden saying, I'm the American president, the buck stops here. But along the way, he had a lot of spare change to hand out to people. Of course, you start with Donald Trump. It was his fault, according to Biden, because he was negotiating with the Taliban. And somehow, because of that, Joe Biden couldn't break an agreement with the Taliban because, when you're working with the Taliban, your word is your bond. Because, they're, kind of people you can trust. He even had some shade thrown at Barack Obama, where he talked about he was the only one in the Obama administration that was against trying to bring democracy to Afghanistan. He talked about the Afghan people. He talked about the Afghan leadership, and he talked about the Afghan military, all of which was, I thought, a very strange way of saying the buck stops here. So by the time the buck got to the desk at the Resolute desk at 1600, there was maybe, 38 cents because he had passed the rest of the blame on to everybody else. I think there's a point to be made. There's 2 separate things here. One is the policy, and then there's the execution of the policy. There's no doubt that Joe Biden, from a long time ago, even back in the Obama administration, was against this nation building in Afghanistan. And, he decided he was not going to, another quote that he had was, I'm not going to hand it down to the next president. So instead what he's going to do is hand down to the next president Afghanistan under control by the Taliban, who hates Americans. So which one do you prefer? I think I might prefer A than B, but, so be it. So there's that policy, but then there's the execution of the policy. And the execution, I've been listening to all of this, and the execution of his policy has been very Jimmy Carter-esque. So let's throw another American president in there. It's totally incompetent. The execution of his goal or his strategy to withdraw, to do it safely, to get, American citizens out, diplomats out, their families out, people who have helped the American people there, get them out, contractors out, to put maybe, since they're so, this administration is so concerned about women, maybe putting some safeguards in place for women, considering how poorly and how little the Taliban thinks of women. But none of that happened. Inside of 2 weeks, Americans are overrun. Helicopters are flying off of the embassy, shuttling people. On July 8th of this year, the president said that will never happen. A month and a half later, it happens. His execution of this policy really has been one of the most inept chapters, I think, that we have ever seen. And the sad part is, the truly sad part is, there's the American military, the men and the women who sacrificed, some who didn't come home, some who came home physically hurt, many came home, mentally scarred, and they and their families have to deal with this. And for what? We run like with our tails between our legs, trying to get out of Afghanistan. And for and especially I think everybody's focused on the women, because you have a generation of women after 20 years that are used to going to school, used to be treated like citizens. They're used to having a voice. They're used to being part of their politics and their government. They're used to being able to go out and enjoy life. That just ended. inside of 2 weeks. That just ended, and it's not like they're going to be, well, you can't go to school. I mean, the way the culture of the people taking over treat women is so egregious and atrocious. It's in many ways indescribable, and
And Mike,
that's him.
I think it's important for the folks listening to us and also those that are going to be watching the video to kind of get a little glimpse of. You mentioned July 8th as with President Joe Biden and kind of his comments saying that it wasn't going to be the next, another Vietnam because the Taliban wasn't as sophisticated or, they were going to do anything. So let's just take a little moment. Let's kind of hear some of Biden's words as to what he said on July 8th, and it kind of give you a little context as to kind of we continue on this conversation.
President, some Vietnamese veterans see echoes of their experience in this withdrawal in Afghanistan. Do you see any parallels between this withdrawal and what happened in Vietnam with some people feeling?
None whatsoever. Zero. What you had entire brigades breaking through the gates of our embassy. 6, if I'm not mistaken. The Taliban is not the North Vietnamese army. They're not remotely comparable in terms of capability. There's going to be no circumstance where you see people being lifted off the roof of a embassy of the United States from Afghanistan. It is not at all comparable. Go the other side. Yeah. Hang on a second.
Mr. President, how serious was the corruption among the Afghanistan government to this mission failing there?
Well, first of all, the mission hasn't failed yet.
Well, and Mike, now that we just listened to Joe Biden and some of his words, and I think what you said is correct, and I think that I don't understand. I don't know if people kind of grasp at what just transformed in Afghanistan. Yes, there were 2 decades of changes, of reforms. I mean, everything as simple as allowing a woman the ability or the right to drive, allowing the ability of a woman to go outside and walk in the street to the market, to the store, to go get her nails done, to go get her hair done, without having to walk with either her husband or her brother or her father. Mm-hmm. The ability for women to go out and actually get an education, learn to read, that was all banned. And so and one of the other horrific things that we're now getting reports, not just of people, and this is, if you look at the images of people trying to get on the planes and people falling from the sky because they're just trying to escape. You're now getting reports of the Taliban going out and just kidnapping women. Because what they do is they make them their personal sex slaves, and they'll call it a marriage, and it's even Jack Taper mentioned a little earlier today on CNN. He's like, this isn't a marriage. This is no other way to look at it. It's just slavery. Yeah, it's
slavery,
sex slave, and that is what was happening before. That's they're getting reports now of this, and so. Mm-hmm. I mean, this whole thing is, and then you hear Joe Biden talk about today or his comments about, well, we will go out there and continue to support these women. We will go out and ask the United Nations to kind of come together and go out there to try to help them, help Afghanistan and help the people of Afghanistan. Well, those are words. And at the same time, there's 2 embassies that did not shut down. And the 2 embassies is Russia and China. And they're in there. And, a little while ago, today you had, Putin go out there and say this is a great for the people of Afghanistan. And we recognize the Taliban as now being the leadership in Afghanistan. And so I guess it's a horrific situation of what's happening there, what's happening to the people there. But at the same time, I think it's got other bigger implications because for other nations or other countries that we go out and try to help, what's that message that goes out there, Mike? It's the message.
You're on your own, babe.
Yeah. Can you trust us? Can you trust us to be there to help you out? And I guess the biggest fault of it all is, the buck does stop with the president. And you've been in the administration before. You've worked over for an administration, a presidential administration. You've worked in government for a long time. He's getting reports. He's getting intelligent reports that are supposed to tell him, if we do X, Y is going to happen. Or if we do this other thing happened. What happened to this whole thing, Mike?
That's a great question because there's a failure, not just in leadership and the execution, but also in the data and the information. It's I think of this. We just watched the Olympics, and on the Olympics, you saw every angle of every sporting event because there were drones everywhere. Didn't we have drones in Kabul and around Afghanistan to track what the Taliban is doing? It makes no sense that unless the information was given to him and he decided to ignore it because he was being stubborn about implementing his policy, which he had pre-decided to do, then it's a huge failure on the part of the military. And somebody's head should roll for that. Because, yes, it gives, and I've seen this a lot on social media today by a lot of my friends that are more on the right side of the aisle. And they're talking about the black eye it gives America. And it does. And it raises the question amongst anybody in any other country, why would I try and, partner with America when, push comes to shove and I turn around and they're gone, especially in this kind of haphazard, chaotic way. But it really is a humanity. And this is the part that I just don't get, because this is a Democrat administration that is supposed to be the champion of women, not just women in the United States, but women across the world. Where's Kamala? Where's Kamala? I mean, thank God he didn't say, like he always does, well, we got a problem there, so I'm going to send Kamala and she's going to talk to the different countries and find out what's really going on, and then we'll come up with a solution. But where is she? She's supposed to, first woman vice president, and yet she sits there, and I haven't heard a word from her. Why isn't she talking about the fact that this policy decision and its execution is going to cause devastation to these women in Afghanistan, many of which, the young women, do not know any different than what they grew up with over the last 20 years. Whether it was being able to go to school, being able to drive, being able to be out on their own, being able to have freedom, being able to learn, being able to grow. It's not going to happen anymore. This isn't like, some kind of small thing. This is a huge subjugation of women because of their culture. And the fact that I just find it amazing that humanitarian aspect is not addressed by this administration, because that's supposedly what this administration is all about.
Well, Mike, maybe it's because they're so focused on climate change and want to get rid of the combustion, the internal combustion engine that, because everything for them has become climate change. And so maybe if we wrap this around climate change, they'd be more focused on it.
I don't know. There's going to be climate change, all right. I mean, it's not going to be pretty. It's just, it's unfathomable to me, and such hypocrisy, really, that they are supposedly the champion of women, not only in this country but across the country, and human rights. He kept talking about human rights, and his path to human rights is going to be, well, we're going to talk to the United Nations and pass a resolution. It's like, come on, man.
Yeah, and
don't
you're right.
Have an answer for him.
Yeah, and you're right. We haven't heard from Kamala yet, and he was in vacation over at Camp David. He, a lot of pressure today. He came back. He came to Washington D.C. and then didn't take any questions today. He just gave his thing, gave his speech, left, and word is he went back to Camp David, and so he'll be updated there in Camp David. And so we'll see. I mean, we'll see how many more days he goes without answering questions. But I mean, it also raises a couple other items. Politically, what happens to the Senate, what happens to Congress as this story begins to unfold, because I can't see, Joe Biden did say he was going to send 7,000 troops back to Afghanistan, but that was just to basically secure the airport.
Right.
CNN and other reporters are there. As this thing unfolds, I don't see any positive things that are going to unfold on this. When you've got all these other networks who are coming down to the administration for failing to answer questions, failing to respond as to why this is happening, is an absurdity.
Well, you brought up a good point, and it goes to the whole execution thing. So he's sending in 7,000 troops to secure a commercial airport. We had 7 Air Force military bases in Afghanistan. Why, in God's name, even if you didn't have all this intelligence, why would you not keep one of those military bases open so that you have a secure Air Force military base that people could go to and already is protected? But no, because of the agreement with the Taliban, they decide to close all 7 military bases, which could have been used. And again, it's like, if you're sitting across the table from someone and you're negotiating and all of that stuff, and you shake hands, that's one thing for somebody, but you're shaking hands with terrorists who hate Americans, that want to kill us because we're Americans and subjugate women. So you shouldn't be sitting across the table with them in the first place. And in the second place, if they say the sky is blue, you better turn around and make sure it's blue, because you shouldn't trust them as far as you can throw them. And you're right, politically, this doesn't impact Joe Biden. This is a non-issue in 2024. That's what he's banking on. Although, as we discussed, some of his quotes and some of the things he said today are going to, have the potential of coming back and biting him in the butt. But, in all likelihood, he's not running in 2024 if he gets that far. And the real impact politically, I think, is going to be next year. Just another thing that the Democrats in the House and the Senate are going to have to overcome. That I think people look at this and they say, I think they say, yeah, we shouldn't have been there for 20 years. Every time we're getting ready to leave, the Afghan government says, oh, you can't go. It's just another year. And we keep getting suckered in. And I think American people understand that. And so deciding to leave and having the cojones to leave is one thing. Doing it in such a poor fashion that leaves Americans, diplomats, people that helped Americans, and the women who were left behind so vulnerable and threatened is what they don't understand. We're a superpower. How can we screw up this bad? That's what I think people are going to remember.
Well, and let's go politically. This past weekend, you had Governor Gavin Newsom of California, who had said that, you can expect to see Joe Biden and Kamala Harris coming out to California to help him campaign against the recall. I can't see a scenario anytime soon where you're going to have where you're going to have Joe Biden or Kamala Harris come out, because it isn't going to be a question of the recall. It's all going to be a question of Afghanistan.
Right.
And the messaging will just get itself blurred. But at the same time, California also has a very large population of, Afghan refugees. And I could see protests. I could see international reporters coming out and making it not about the recall, but about Joe Biden's decision.
Oh, big time. I mean, he just, again, Kamala probably still comes out because she's from here and she has, strong support in the state. But anything that's related to Joe Biden is going to be about this, at least, and again, if the election was in November of 2021, different situation. By then, some of this would have played itself out, but it's not. And so he's got to deal with this in less than a month. This thing ain't going away in less than a month.
Just remember,
ballots I got mine.
Are hitting the mailboxes. Ballots are hitting the mailbox this week, and so you've got yours already, and so people are starting to vote.
Exactly, and I think what happens again is people look at it and they don't disagree. I don't think a lot of people. It'd be interesting to see survey research and polling on it. I don't know that people would disagree with the decision, but the execution of that decision was so bad and it created such chaos and such images and such damage to the country, to their message on humanitarian rights, and the fact that down the road, I mean, as we said it before, he's not going to pass Afghanistan on, Americans' commitment to Afghanistan to the next president. He's going to pass on Afghanistan run by the Taliban, which hate Americans and will do anything to kill us without thinking twice, to the next president. So, I think that's really what what's going to motivate people here, or they're going to pay attention to. And I wouldn't want to be on the ballot in a month with him by my side.
So elections are coming up. I know it's a year from this November, but in our cycle, that's a short period of time.
Right.
We get through summer, we get through the fall, and we're into another season. Do you believe that maybe are some of these candidates, especially those that are running in the Senate, in Congress, at what point does this become an issue where you start raising the questions and looking at Kamala as a potential 2024 candidate? When do you start trying to pull her into this particular discussion, just from a political sense?
Let me answer it this way. As far as Kamala is concerned, we shouldn't wait a year or 2 years or 3 years. The question should be asked now. Where the hell are you? You're supposed to be the champion of women, and your administration is exposing a whole generation of women in Afghanistan to subjugation and slavery. Why aren't you saying anything? Why aren't you doing anything? That should be the first question for her, and it should be now, because that is exactly what's going to be happening here. Now, as far as when you broach it down the road, I think you'll see Republican candidates use it, and I think you see them use it as part of a greater package. In 7 months, we saw a difference between what we pay in gas then and what we pay in gas now. What we pay in food then, what we pay in food now. What we have for jobs then, what we have for jobs now. All of that kind of stuff will be part of, I think this adds to the whole package of, have we gone from a policy of America first to America last? I think that's kind of a good way to sum it up.
But I'm going to correct you in one area, because we were beginning to already see is you've got Democrats that are criticizing the president, and so you've got some fissures that are occurring within this administration, within this party, and maybe part of that discussion also happens is you've got a sense of certain types of Democrats that have won office that are part of the ultra left. Will they get challenged over by some of those Democrats a little bit more toward the middle, or that believe that it's the America first? Because, like I said, Joe Biden and his position, he is starting to get criticized by his own party, by members of his own party.
Well, and it goes to the name of our show, Common Sense in an Uncommon World. Okay, I think most people can understand after 20 years of not making any progress in terms of democratizing Afghanistan, the question becomes, can you militarily force that to happen? And probably the answer is no. So the question becomes, common sense says, if that's not going to work, is bringing back the Taliban the alternative, or there's like a huge middle part that you can find something else that may work for these people, and that didn't happen. So it's like, I just don't think that people look at this and they say, you know what, we shouldn't be in there. But my God, we're supposed to be smarter than this. We're supposed to be more compassionate than this. And I think Democrats understand. I think a lot of Democrats are, not Nancy Pelosi. We saw what she said. Not what's his name, peace loving Jerry Brown. Again, another one that loves climate action, and is a proponent of women's rights and all this other stuff. Both of them have said the president made a great decision and is doing a great job. I don't know how you square that when you look in the mirror, because again, it's not. These are bad people. They're terrorists. They'll do anything. They have no respect for life. They have no respect for women. They have no respect for Americans. And, we just handed them a country. Here you go. It's crazy.
Well, I'm sure Mike will be getting a lot more of this, in the coming days and the coming weeks. And so, as we'll get information, I'm sure there'll be a couple of reporters asking here in California whether Biden will be coming out to California to campaign for Gavin Newsom or not.
The weather's beautiful. We got some beautiful ocean stuff going on. We've got a great French Laundry up in the northern part of the state. You can go to schools and watch kids wear masks that they said they weren't going to have to wear. Come on out, Joe. The weather's great.
Well, we'll see what happens, Mike. And so I think we're going to leave it here. And this concludes another episode of the Hector Mike Experience.
The foreign policy edition.
Yeah, it is a foreign policy edition. Yep. So as Mike indicated before, common sense in an uncommon world. And so until the next time, Mike.
Good talking with you, Hector.
You too.